There is a silent epidemic out there. It's fathers being forcibly taken out of the picture. These days, single motherhood is getting to be all too common, which is quite unfortunate because children growing up in single-parent households aren't getting raised anywhere near as well as they should be. Both parental figures are needed. Now, why is single motherhood on the rise? For two major reasons. First one being the rise of female promiscuity and premarital sex. I've talked about this phenomenon in previous videos, but to sum it up, we live in a time where single motherhood is venerated. All too often you'll hear, "I don't need a man," and being a single mom is treated like a badge of honor. We also live in a time where girls are encouraged to sleep around. You only live once, right? So let's make stupid decisions. As such, it's not uncommon for girls to have babies out of wedlock. This becomes more ubiquitous with the presence of dating apps. Girls will get knocked up by the alpha Chad she just met on Tinder, and since it was just a one-night fling, he's out of the picture and she's left with a kid. So that's reason number one. This is the case where the baby daddy doesn't want anything to do with the kid. The second reason why fathers are out of the picture is because of divorce and the corruption in the family court system. For the most part, these are the fathers who want to be in their children's lives, but the family courts make that very difficult and expensive. And that's what I want to talk more about in this video. Stay tuned.
The main contributors to fatherlessness are divorce and out-of-wedlock births.
This is Marilyn York. She's a divorce attorney and men's rights advocate. Her TED Talk is the main inspiration for this video, so we'll be hearing from her a lot in this video. Now, I'm not a father, nor will I ever be one, and many of my viewers are on the same page. But my channel is about men's issues, and I would be remiss if I didn't address the issue of family court corruption. Not only is this a father's issue, it's a children's issue as well, and therefore, it's a societal problem. Generally speaking, there are many negative consequences for children who have grown up in single-parent households.
71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 71% of all pregnant teenagers, 85% of all children with behaviour disorders, 90% of all homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 85% of all youth in prison come from fatherless homes.
I'm going to divide this video into several sections. The first is gender differences and how men and women parent differently, but always complementary, and why it's important for a child to have both parental figures. In the next section, we'll talk about the negative effects of fatherlessness. Then after that, we'll talk about the corruption of the family court system. And finally, we'll look at some websites and resources that fathers who find themselves in family court may find useful.
Men parent differently than women. Big surprise.
Generally speaking, a mother's love is more coddling and protective, and a father's love is more about teaching their children about the facts of life, the real world. Relatively speaking, fathers are more likely to teach their children responsibility and about the consequences of their actions. Where a mother may want to give her child a fish, a father will be much more likely to want to teach them how to fish. And this makes sense because after all, men and women are wired differently. So it stands to reason that their parenting styles would be different too. If you're interested in looking into this topic further, you may want to check out the book Brain Sex by neuropsychologist Dr. Ann Moore. She can tell if somebody is a man or a woman by simply looking at a brain scan. Anyway, not only are men and women wired differently biologically, we are also treated very differently. So there are environmental differences between the sexes as well. People seem to parent the way they themselves were treated. And let's face it, women are coddled and catered to. Their comfort is a priority. So naturally, they tend to coddle and cater to their children as well. On the flip side, men know firsthand that the world is rough. It's competitive. You have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You work hard and usually don't get any appreciation for it. You're constantly told that your gender is toxic, and the list goes on. So it makes sense that a father would want to prepare his children as best as possible to best handle these kinds of setbacks that their children could encounter. A child needs both these aspects. They need the nurturing side of the mother as well as the encouraging side of the father. Here's Marilyn talking about the types of questions that mothers tend to answer more easily about their children than fathers can, and vice versa.
When getting my father clients ready for court, I prepare them for this kind of interrogation. Who's your children's doctor or dentist? What's the name of your school principal or even their teacher? What grades did they get on their last report card? 9 times out of 10, they miss the majority of these questions. Seriously, does this mean they don't care or love their children as much? I bet it makes you wonder. But please hold your judgment. Here are the questions that my father clients can easily answer. If your son could be a superhero, what would his power be? What kind of monsters do your kids fear? How high does your daughter feel comfortable flying in a swing? What makes your son feel defeated? Yet, in my experience cross-examining hundreds of mothers in family court, these are the harder questions for them. What I can tell you is that the data unequivocally tells us fathers are vital, and yet laws and society undervalue their importance, making it harder for them to be in their children's lives. Even fathers underrate their own value. I know this data upsets a lot of mothers, me included. But advocating for fathers isn't about diminishing mothers. While children deserve both parents whenever possible, this crisis is specific to fathers. The occurrence of fatherlessness is epidemic. The effects are catastrophic, and the causes are male gender specific. Nearly 30 years ago, leading child psychologist Michael Lamb reminded us, fathers are the forgotten contributors to child development. Yet, researchers have found that children with involved fathers have stronger cognitive and motor skills, elevated physical and mental health, become better problem solvers, and are more confident, curious, and empathetic. Sadly, we've had this data for 30 years, and fatherlessness has only continued to rise during this time.
In her TED Talk, Marilyn talks about the negative effects that a fatherless environment has on children.
In 2011, I joined the board for a local charity called Nevada Youth Empowerment Project, or NYEP. NYEP is a housing program for homeless girls ages 18 to 24. As board president of this small charity, I've been closely involved and gotten to know the girls and their tragic stories over the years. Hundreds of otherwise homeless girls have come through our program. Their backgrounds and what they have endured would haunt you. Do you know the one thing all of these girls have in common? They all come from fatherless homes. Sadly, these girls aren't the exception. They're the rule. My fourth lesson about fatherhood came from the data. According to the Center for Disease Control, children from fatherless homes account for 90% of all homeless and runaway kids, 71% of high school dropouts, and 63% of youth suicides.
And despite the crucial roles that fathers play, the family court does nothing to help this situation. In fact, the government profits from this. Family court is a special kind of court that handles divorces, division of assets, restraining orders, and child custody. This type of court is different than criminal court. In a criminal court, you would have attorneys, detectives, and juries involved in the process of finding the truth. It's not perfect, but at least the responsibility of justice is distributed among more than just one person. Family court, however, is a civil court. So despite how serious the allegations may be, you don't have a jury of peers or anything like that. The power rests solely with one person, the judge. And a judge can very well have personal biases, and they most definitely have an incentive to keep fathers on the hook. And this is the corruption in the family court system.
Follow the money.
The family court system is not built with the child in mind. If they cared about the children at all, they wouldn't seek to deprive that child of a loving father by sending him to jail because he missed a payment once. The government takes a big chunk of the child support that the man pays. You would think that money would all go to the children, but nope. The government, as per usual, has to get their grubby hands on some of that cash too. So there is an incentive for the court system to squeeze out as much monetary value from the man as possible. They profit from keeping fathers away from their families. And they get away with this because it's all under the guise of what's best for the child. The court gets to decide what's best for the child. And as Marilyn explains, it's an uphill battle for fathers to get 50-50 custody.
Family court is one of the critical places where fathers are disadvantaged, and this hurts kids. Historically, this maternal preference was solidified in the tender years doctrine, which mandated custody of children under age 4 be awarded to mothers. This doctrine was in use until the 80s. As the laws progressed, visitation for fathers improved, but it took a lot of years before the law was finally gender equal. In fact, it wasn't until 2017 that Nevada finally adopted a presumption for joint physical custody. When I began my practice, and until 10 years ago, the best my father clients could expect was every other weekend visitation and maybe a dinner on the off week. While significant legal progress has been made, this long-standing bias against fathers still occurs in the enforcement of custody orders, in child support rulings, and it exists in paternity laws. Right now, once custody has been ordered, it's illegal to remove a child from their father, usually a felony. But it's perfectly legal in all 50 states for a woman to conceal her pregnancy, leave the father's name off the birth certificate, and never tell him he is a child, ever. How is this not kidnapping? Just as horrible, a woman can knowingly list the wrong father on a child's birth certificate, deceive him, and a short while later, in many states, the wrong man becomes that child's legal father forever. He's obligated to a child that isn't his, and that child just lost their real father with little to no recourse. This is a betrayal of the worst kind. And the law not only allows it, it creates the opportunity.
Sickening, isn't it? A man could be responsible for a kid that isn't even his. This type of paternity fraud happened to a man named Carnell Alexander. Here's his story.
Information in a story first exposed about the state ordering a Detroit man to pay child support for a kid that everybody agrees isn't his.
As 7 Action News reporter Kim Russell tells us, the court has made him a wanted man until he pays up.
When I exposed this story, I thought someone a friend of the court would fix a clear injustice. Instead, a warrant has now been issued for Carnell Alexander's arrest. For him, it's deja vu. In 1991, during a traffic stop, Carnell Alexander got a shock. Police arrested him. His crime? Being a deadbeat dad.
I knew I didn't have a child, so I was kind of blown back.
He told 7 Action News he would later learn this happened because his ex needed help.
I had to turn to welfare to get assistance to take care of them, and I had to put him down as the father. That was the only way I can get assistance.
That started a paternity case. A process server then turned in this paper saying Carnell had been notified at a house in Highland Park. So when he didn't show up at court, he was legally listed as dad. The problem? Carnell didn't get notified. He wasn't even at a house in Highland Park. He was in prison for a crime he committed as a young man. And by the time he learned about the paternity case, judges told him it was too late. Legally, he owes the state more than $30 grand for assistance paid to care for a child.
I did not father, that I did not biologically create or spend any time with throughout my life. I find that very unfair.
Carnell says he won't pay. He tells me tomorrow he will turn himself in.
I will go to jail if I have to because I'm tired of the situation of the mishandling of the case.
I don't think that's right.
Murray Davis from the National Family Justice Association says there are thousands of men in Carnell Alexander's shoes because Michigan does not have paternity fraud laws that protect men.
Michigan does not recognize paternity fraud in the sense that a person who has been found not to be the father is relieved of those obligations.
And if that wasn't bad enough for men, get a load of this. A man's child support payments will get raised, not because childcare expenses increased, but because the man's income has increased. If a man receives any additional income, like getting a second job in the hopes of helping to pay for his child support, all that's going to do is increase the amount that he has to pay in child support. Even getting additional income from an inheritance will raise his child support payments. The system is looking to bleed fathers dry. Here's a family court attorney explaining some of these situations.
Hey, child support's not always fair. I just had a case where mom had taken dad to court. She was making about $10 an hour, working 25 hours a week, menial job. Dad was working for a big corporation, putting in between 40 and 45 hours a week, making some overtime. Court hit him with $800 a month in child support. No big deal. So he goes out, he gets a second job. So he's working part-time, a second job, making $15 an hour, working about 20 to 25 hours a week to offset the decrease in his income from having to pay child support. Well, guess what? They take him back to court a year later and they say, hey, we're going to hit you with another $500 a month in child support because of this second job. Now, mom's still working 20 to 25 hours a week, making $10 an hour. Dad's now working between 70 and 75 a week, making overtime with a second job, and now his child support goes up another $500. Doesn't seem fair, does it? Dad was paying child support of about $750 a month for 2 children, based on his income of $50,000 a year. Well, about 2 years into his child support obligation, he ended up inheriting a large sum of money, about $1 million, when his grandparents passed away. Mom got wind of that and hired a lawyer and took Dad back to court and asked for an increase in child support, claiming that that inheritance that he received should be included in income to increase Dad's income, thereby increasing his child support obligation. Well, the court agreed, and what the court did is it took the amount of money that he inherited, divided that by the number of years that the children would be minors and he would have a child support obligation, and then increased Dad's income by that amount. Dad ended up having to pay child support now based on $150,000 a year of income when you included that inheritance in there. What do you think about that? Do you think that's fair? Jerome woke up one morning and his child support had gone from $250 a month to over $1,000 a month, and he didn't even know it. Well, here's what had happened. When he and the mother of his child broke up, 4 children actually, they had agreed on a 50-50 parenting schedule. He would have 50% of the time, she would have 50% of the time. The child support office set child support at $250 a month based on that 50-50 parenting schedule. Well, about 2 years later, the child support office petitioned the court on behalf of the mother of the children to modify the child support. When they did, they sent notice to Jerome's last address that they had on file. Problem is, he had moved. He never got notice. The case went to trial. Mom lied and said that he wasn't getting any parenting days, and the child support was increased to over $1,000 a month. Here's what Jerome did wrong. He didn't notify the child support office of his change of address. Guys, you've got to do that. Otherwise, the court is going to hear the case regardless of whether you actually got notice or not, because you are presumed to have gotten notice if child support sent that notice to your last known address. Keep up with that, guys. You'll get yourself in trouble if you don't.
These are some websites that I found that provide advice and support for men who are going through the ringer of family court. Links will be provided in the video description. The first resource I want to talk about is OpenBar. This is very helpful if you're having to deal with family court. It's an open source document system that you can find on GitHub. It'll ask you some questions, and based on your answers, it'll create the necessary documents that you'll need, and it guides you through the process of where you should send these documents. By doing this yourself, you are saving some money because you won't need to pay an attorney to curate these documents for you. This OpenBar source code was created and developed by a man named Jonathan Deek. He's had some bad experiences when it comes to family court. There was a period of time where he got injured and was unable to work, so naturally this caused him to get behind in his child support payments. The court order asked him for a doctor's note, which he did indeed provide, but they rejected his note because it didn't provide a phone number or address. But nowhere in the court order did it say the doctor's note needed to have any of those things. As per usual, the court was just looking for any possible way it could to keep the man on the hook. So this is the guy who developed this OpenBar to make life a little easier for fathers to deal with the paperwork, because Lord knows they already have more than enough to worry about as it is. Some other websites worth checking out are fathers.com, fathersforkids.com, and pissedoffparent.com. These websites provide a wealth of information for you. As always, links will be in the description. It's a rough world out there, gentlemen, and the law is not on your side. And that about does it for this video. If you want to learn more about how the legal system screws men over, I'll leave links to my playlist on the subject in the description, end screen, and pinned comment. Very insightful stuff. And until next time, I'm out.